Second week of January. The calls had tapered, 30 or 40 a day, still too many, but the desperate edge was fading. Less fury, more exhaustion, like a siege that had run out of ammunition but hadn't surrendered. I had 58 saved voicemails in a folder on my phone labeled documentation. I had a spiral notebook with every call logged, date, time, caller, duration, content summary. I had a screenshot of an email from diane.owens.clayton@gmail.com that nobody in my family knew I'd seen. I made 3 decisions during a night shift, between checking vitals on a patient in bed 4, and restocking the supply closet. 1. I would not pay for the wedding. That was non-negotiable. It had been non-negotiable since the word no left my mouth on Christmas Day, and no amount of voicemails would change it. 2. I would not go permanent no contact. My mother had wounded me. My father had failed me. My sister had reduced me to an equation. But they were my family. And I was not ready to lose them forever. I was not going to let one terrible night at a folding table define the rest of my life. 3. I would wait for the right moment. I was an ICU nurse. I knew that timing was the difference between a medication saving a life and stopping a heart. The right words at the wrong time were just noise. I texted Aunt Patricia. If the family wants a real conversation, not another ambush, I'll come. Same group. Same people who were at Christmas. Patricia replied in 14 minutes. I'll make it happen. I called Patricia Brennan, asked her to forward me the original email chain. She did. I printed it at the nurse's station at 3 a.m., folded the paper in thirds, and put it in my scrub pocket. I didn't know exactly when I'd use it, but I was ready. 35 relatives watched me walk out at Christmas. 35 relatives were going to watch what happened next. If you've ever waited for the right moment to speak your truth, if you've ever saved every voicemail because you knew someday the record would matter, type keep going in the comments, because I didn't just go back to face my family. I went back with an email they didn't know existed. Third Saturday of January. Aunt Patricia had booked the fellowship hall at Clayton Community Church. Neutral ground. No one's house, no one's territory, just a large room with linoleum floors and fluorescent lights and a cross on the wall that looked like it had witnessed plenty of family disputes and wasn't impressed by any of them. Folding chairs arranged in a rough circle. A pot of chili on the counter next to a stack of styrofoam cups, and a coffee maker that looked older than I was. 35 relatives, same cast as Christmas, minus the kids. Adults only. Diane and Robert sat on one side of the circle, shoulder to shoulder. Diane's posture was rigid, chin up, lips pressed together, a woman preparing to be proven right. Robert sat slightly behind her, the way he always did. Chloe was next to them. No Daniel. This was Owen's family only. Her eyes were red. She'd been crying before she arrived. Aunt Patricia stood by the coffee maker playing host, trying to manage the tension with caffeine and chili. Grandma Helen was wheeled in by one of the assisted living aides who parked her chair by the door and left. Helen positioned herself deliberately near the exit, where she could see everyone. I walked in last, deliberately. I was wearing scrubs, dark blue with the hospital logo on the pocket. I'd come straight from a 14-hour shift. I hadn't changed on purpose. I wanted every person in that room to see exactly where I'd been while they were at home composing voicemails. I wanted them to see the version of me that showed up. The one who worked through the night, who kept people alive, who carried the smell of hospital antiseptic and exhaustion. I sat down, phone in my right pocket, folded paper in my left scrub pocket. I was ready. Patricia opened the discussion. She stood in the center of the circle, hands clasped in front of her, speaking in that careful voice she used when she was trying to prevent something from catching fire. We're all here because this family is hurting. No one's the enemy. We're going to talk this through, and we're going to listen. She barely got the last word out before Diane cut her off. There's nothing to talk through. Diane didn't stand yet, but she leaned forward in her chair with the energy of someone about to launch an attack. Sarah knows what she needs to do. She's known since Christmas. We've called, we've texted, we've begged. She walked out of her own family's Christmas dinner, and hasn't spoken to any of us in almost a month. She looked at me. All you have to do is say yes, Sarah. That's all. Say yes and this is over. I didn't say anything. I sat in my folding chair with my hands on my knees and my scrub still smelling like disinfectant. And I let her words land in the middle of the circle and lie there. A church fellowship hall on a Saturday afternoon. Fluorescent lights humming. Chili cooling on the counter. 35 people in folding chairs who'd driven from Clayton and Raleigh and Fayetteville. And as far as Wilmington because Patricia had told them this mattered. My phone in my right pocket with 58 voicemails. My folded paper in my left pocket with the truth. I had done ICU shifts where 3 patients coded within an hour. Alarms screaming, doctors shouting, medications drawn up and pushed in the span of 45 seconds. A church hall with bad lighting and a chili pot was not going to rattle me. I met my mother's eyes. I didn't blink. I waited. Let her spend her ammunition first. Diane stood. She'd been waiting for this moment. You could see it in how she rose, how she smoothed her shirt, how she took a breath and addressed the room like a woman making a closing argument she'd rehearsed in the bathroom mirror for a month. I need y'all to understand something, she said. I never had a real wedding. I married Robert at a courthouse on a Tuesday morning in a dress I'd worn to work the day before. No flowers, no photographer, no first dance. My mother-in-law didn't even come. She looked around the circle. Some of the older aunts nodded. One wiped her eye. Diane's voice thickened. I swore my daughters would have better. I swore they would have the wedding I never got. And now Chloe has that chance. She turned to me. Sarah makes more money than Robert and I combined. She has no mortgage, no children, no husband. She has the money. She let that sit. Then she said the word that changed the temperature of the room. She's choosing to let her sister suffer. That's selfish. Selfish. The word dropped into the silence like a stone into still water, and the ripples went everywhere. I watched it land on the faces around the circle. The slight flinch from Aunt Patricia, the uncomfortable shift from Uncle Frank, the way Chloe's eyes widened just slightly because even she could feel that the word was a step too far. My mother had just called me selfish in front of 35 people for the second time in a month. The first time I walked out. This time, I stayed, because this time I had something in my left pocket that changed everything. I kept my hands on my knees. I kept my breathing even. I let selfish sit in the room and waited for it to stop echoing. I let 5 seconds pass after selfish before I spoke. 5 seconds is a long time in a quiet room. Then I opened my mouth and I did something I had never done before in my life. I told my family exactly what I did for them. Not to guilt them, not to score points, because they genuinely didn't know. That's the thing about being the fixer. Nobody tracks the fixing. I'm going to tell you what I do for this family, I said. My voice was calm. My hands were still on my knees. Mom's blood pressure medication. I've been picking it up from the pharmacy in Clayton every month for 5 years. 60 trips, 40 minutes each way. No one asked me to stop. I looked at Robert. Dad's taxes. I've been filing them for 8 years. Taught myself the software. Did the forms. Caught a $1,500 deduction in 2020 that he would have missed. Total saved over 8 years, roughly $6,500. I looked at the circle. Grandma Helen's emergency contact. 3 in the morning calls, 3 times last year alone. 40-minute drives in the dark. I held her hand at the hospital when she broke her hip. I signed the paperwork. Patricia's eyes were wet. Frank stared at his shoes. Every Christmas for the last 8 years. Organized by me. And bought by me. Casserole made by me. Disposable plates, plastic cups, svetea, olme. I paused, let the list breathe. Including this past Christmas, the one where Mom stood up and told me to pay $80,000 or lose my family. The ham on that table, I brined it overnight. The green bean casserole, my recipe. I drove 40 minutes on Christmas Eve to cook half that dinner. I looked at Diane. You delivered an ultimatum over a meal I made. The room was quiet, not uncomfortable quiet, heavy quiet, the kind where people are hearing something they should have heard a long time ago. I continued, same tone, same posture. I make $78,000 a year. That sounds like a lot until you subtract federal and state taxes, Social Security, Medicare. Take home is about $54,000. My rent in Raleigh is $15,000 a year. Student loans, Because no one in this family helped pay for nursing school, $4,500. Car payment and insurance, $3,800. Groceries, utilities, phone, gas for the 40-minute drives to Clayton that nobody asks me to make, but everybody expects, another $9,500. Grandma Helen's supplemental care items that her insurance doesn't cover, about $8,000 over the last 2 years. I did the math out loud because I wanted them to hear it. After everything, I have about $1,000 left each month. No vacation fund, no savings cushion, no dentist in 3 years because the copay is $85 and $85 is the difference between filling my gas tank and not. I looked at Chloe. You told me at Thanksgiving that I don't have anyone to spend money on, that I don't have a husband or kids. You said it was just math. Chloe's face went red. She looked at her lap. You're right, I said. I don't have a husband or kids because I ended a relationship during the pandemic, so I could work double shifts in the ICU. Because I spend my weekends driving to Clayton to pick up prescriptions and file taxes, and check on Grandma. Because I've been spending my time and my money on this family for 10 years. I paused. Robert was staring at the linoleum. Diane opened her mouth. That's all very touching, Sarah. But I'm not finished. I reached into my left scrub pocket. The paper was warm from my body heat, soft from being folded and unfolded and refolded over the past 3 weeks. I pulled it out, held it in my lap for a moment, let the room watch me unfold it, crease by crease, the way a nurse opens a chart she's already memorized but needs the room to see. Mom, in late October, Richard and Patricia Brennan sent you an email. Daniel's parents. They offered to pay for the entire wedding. The temperature in the room dropped. Not literally. The fellowship hall was 70 degrees and would stay that way. But something shifted in the air. Something tightened. And I watched it happen on my mother's face in real time. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. Nothing came out. Robert's eyes widened. His whole body went rigid in the folding chair like someone had run a current through him. Chloe said, "What?" Sharp, high-pitched, a child's voice from a 27-year-old woman. I held up the paper. This is a printout of the email chain. The Brennan's offer was sent October 25th. Your reply was sent November 1st, 7 weeks before Christmas. I held it the way I would hold a lab result for a patient's family. Matter of fact, steady hand, no drama. The information was dramatic enough without my help. The room leaned forward, 35 people in folding chairs, and every single one of them shifted at the same time, creating a chorus of metallic creaks that sounded like the room itself was straining to hear. Coffee cups were forgotten. The chili was cold. Uncle Frank had his mouth open. Aunt Patricia had her hand over hers. And my mother looked at that piece of paper like it was a snake coiled on the linoleum between us. I read the email aloud. I didn't rush. I didn't editorialize. I let the words do the work, the way a good nurse lets the vitals tell the story. From Patricia Brennan to Diane Owens, October 25th. Dear Diane, Richard and I would be honored to host the wedding for Chloe and Daniel. Please let us cover the costs as our gift to them. We want this to be a joyful time for everyone. I looked up. The room was holding its breath. 35 people. Not a sound except the coffee maker gurgling in the corner. I looked back down at the paper. From Diane Owens to Patricia Brennan, November 1st. Thank you for the generous offer, but the Owens family takes care of our own celebrations. Sarah will be assisting us with the expenses. No need for outside involvement. I folded the paper once and held it in my lap. I looked at my mother. November 1st, Mom. 7 weeks before you stood up at Christmas dinner in front of every person in this room and told me to pay $80,000 or be cut off from my own family. I let that sit. Daniel's parents offered to cover everything. The full $96,000. A gift. No conditions. The kind of thing a loving family does when their son gets engaged. My voice stayed level. And you said no. Not because you couldn't accept the help. If it were about pride, you would have scaled the wedding down to what you and Dad could afford. You said no because you wanted to control who paid. And you chose me without asking me, without telling me. You announced it to strangers 7 weeks before you announced it to me. I set the paper on my knee. That's not pride, Mom. That's control. The room erupted. Not shouting, worse whispers. The low, scandalized hum of 35 people recalibrating everything they thought they knew about the last month. I heard Patricia's voice, clear and sharp, cut through the noise. Diane, is this true? My mother stood. She was shaking, not trembling, shaking, the full body kind, the kind I'd seen in patients going into shock. Her hands were balled into fists at her sides. Her face was flushed from the jaw up, red spreading like a stain. That is private family business, she shouted. That email was between me and the Brennans, and it has nothing to do with this. I stayed seated. That was deliberate. I had learned something in 10 years of ICU work. The person standing is the one losing control. The person sitting is the one with it. You made it family business, I said. My voice was even quiet, the kind of quiet that makes people lean in. You made it family business when you demanded $80,000 from me in front of 35 people on Christmas Day. You made it family business when you told me to pay or be cut off forever. You made it family business when you had Dad stand up and tell the room that nobody disagrees, that this was my responsibility. I looked at Robert. He hadn't moved. Is that still your position, Dad? Nobody here disagrees? Now that you know the Brennans offered to pay the whole thing. Robert stared at the floor. The linoleum had a crack in it near his left shoe, and he studied it like it held the answer to a question he'd been dodging for 30 years. He didn't speak. His silence was the loudest thing in the room. Louder than Diane's shouting. Louder than the whispers. Louder than the coffee maker that chose that exact moment to finish its cycle with a mechanical click. Diane was still standing, still shaking, still furious. I was still sitting, still calm, still holding a folded piece of paper on my knee. The power in that room had shifted, and every person on every folding chair could feel it. Chloe stood. She stood so fast her folding chair scraped backward on the linoleum, with a sound like a shriek. Tears were streaming down her face, not the pretty, delicate tears she cried at movies, but the raw, ugly kind that come when the ground shifts beneath your feet. Daniel's parents offered to pay? She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at Diane. They offered to pay for the entire wedding, and you said no? Diane's jaw tightened. We are not charity, Chloe. It's not a handout. Chloe's voice cracked. It's Daniel's family. They're going to be my family, and you told them no. This was new. Chloe and Diane had never faced off. Not once in 27 years. Chloe was the daughter who called every day, who texted about television shows, who went to the craft store on Saturdays. She was the easy one, the aligned one. And now she was standing 3 feet from our mother with mascara running down her cheeks, and a look on her face I recognized. The look of someone discovering that the person they trusted most had been making decisions about their life without telling them. The circle was dead silent. Then Robert spoke low, almost a whisper. The kind of voice a man uses when he's admitting something he should have admitted months ago. I knew about the email. Every head turned. He was still sitting, still staring at the linoleum. She showed me the night she wrote the reply. I told her to accept the offer. I told her it was generous and we should say yes. He paused, swallowed. She said no. And he trailed off. I was afraid of your mother. I should have said something at the dinner, at any point. I should have been. He stopped. The silence was the loudest thing in the room. I stood, not fast, not angry. The way you stand when you've said most of what you came to say, and there's only a little bit left. Mom. Diane was still standing across the circle. Her arms were crossed now, locked tight against her body like armor. Her eyes were wet, but her jaw was set. I love you, I said. I love this family. I've spent 10 years making sure everyone's taken care of. The prescriptions, the taxes, the holidays, the 3 a.m. calls. I've never asked for a thank you. I never expected one. I looked around the circle. But I will not be punished for saying no. I will not be harassed with 118 calls in a single day, because I refused to hand over money I don't have for a wedding that didn't need to cost $96,000 in the first place. I looked at Diane. And I will not pay $80,000 because you're too proud to accept generosity from the family your daughter is marrying into. The Brennans aren't outsiders, Mom. They're about to be family, and you treated their kindness like an insult because accepting it meant sharing control. I picked up the folded email from the seat of my chair, refolded along its creases, and put it back in my scrub pocket. The answer was always no. I said it quietly, simply, the way you state a fact that doesn't need defending. It was no on Christmas Day. It was no during 118 calls on New Year's. It was no when I read this email in a coffee shop parking lot. The answer was always no. I looked at her. My mother, 57 years old, standing in a church fellowship hall in Clayton, North Carolina, with her fists clenched and her makeup smeared. You just didn't want to hear it from anyone except me. I turned toward the door. Grandma Helen was there in her wheelchair, exactly where she'd positioned herself when the aide wheeled her in. Near the exit, where she could see the whole room. She looked up at me. Her eyes were clear. Her hands were still on her armrests, the knuckles white from how hard she'd been gripping them. She nodded. Once. Just once. A single slow dip of her chin that carried more pride than any standing ovation I'd ever received in my life. I knelt beside her wheelchair and kissed her forehead. Her skin was cool and papery and smelled like lavender lotion, and the peppermints she kept in her cardigan pocket. I'll bring cookies on Sunday, I said. Make them the oatmeal ones, she said. Don't skimp on the raisins like last time. I laughed. It was the first time I'd laughed in a month. Aunt Patricia followed me to the parking lot. The January air was cold and clean and tasted like nothing, which was a relief after the stale coffee and tension of that fellowship hall. She caught my arm by my car. Sarah. She was crying. Patricia was the family mediator, the smoother, the woman who brought casseroles to every crisis. And right now, she looked like someone who'd just realized that some things can't be smoothed over with a 9x13 dish. I'm sorry I didn't say anything at Christmas, she said. I should have. I didn't know what to say. You made this meeting happen, I said. You called everybody. You booked the hall. You made the chili. I looked at her. That counts, Patricia. She hugged me tight. The kind of hug where someone's apologizing with their arms because the words aren't enough. I drove back to Raleigh. I didn't cry this time. I turned on the radio and thought about oatmeal cookies and how many raisins constituted not skimping. 1 week later, a Tuesday evening, I was on my couch in sweatpants, eating leftover pad thai and watching a documentary about whales, which is what single ICU nurses do on their nights off. And I refused to apologize for it. My phone rang. Chloe. I almost let it go to voicemail, force of habit after 500 and change calls in 3 weeks. But something made me pick up. Her voice was different. Quiet, measured. The breathless, righteous energy was gone. She sounded like someone who'd been doing a lot of thinking and not enough sleeping. Daniel and I talked to his parents, she said. They're still willing to pay. They never withdrew the offer. They just didn't want to push after Mom said no. Good, I said. Sarah. A pause, a long one. I could hear her breathing. I'm sorry about what I said at Thanksgiving. About you not having anyone to spend money on. About it being just math. She was crying again, but different tears. The quiet kind, the kind that come from shame, not frustration. It wasn't math. I was wrong. I looked at the ceiling of my apartment. There was a water stain in the corner. I'd been meaning to report to maintenance for 6 months. I know, I said. Will you come to the wedding? Another pause. Mine this time. I'll think about it. I would. I knew I would go. She was still my sister. And Daniel was good. And a wedding is a beginning, not an ending. And I was not going to let my mother's pride steal one more thing from this family. But I needed Chloe to sit with that. I'll think about it for a while. I needed her to feel the weight of waiting for an answer, not as punishment, as education. February, a Saturday morning. My phone rang and the screen said Mom. I stared at it for 3 rings. 4. Then I picked up. Sarah. Her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. Not the commanding voice from Christmas dinner. Not the pleading voice from the voicemails. Something underneath all of that. Something original. Something that had been buried under 37 years of resentment and binder tabs. And the desperate need to control the one day of her life that was supposed to be perfect. Your aunt says I need to apologize. So, a pause. I'm sorry. I sat at my kitchen table. The same table where I'd wrapped her cashmere scarf in forest green paper 7 weeks earlier. Do you understand why, Mom? Silence. A long one. The kind that tells you someone is fighting between the answer they want to give and the answer that's true. I wanted Chloe to have what I never had, she said finally. I thought you owed it to this family. I thought because you're the strong one, because you can handle things. I thought that meant you should. I don't owe this family a wedding, Mom. My voice was steady, not cold, not warm, honest. I owe this family love. And I've been giving that for 10 years. Every prescription, every tax return, every 3 a.m. drive. You just couldn't see it because it didn't come with a price tag. She cried. Not the controlled tears of a woman performing emotion. Real, ragged, ugly crying. The kind that sounds like something being pulled loose from deep inside. I never had a wedding, Sarah. Her voice broke on my name. I know, Mom. I know it wasn't enough. An apology prompted by your sister isn't the same as an apology that comes from understanding. But it was the first honest sound my mother had made in months. And sometimes a start is enough. June, the wedding. Not at the converted barn outside Chapel Hill with the string lights and the $29,000 price tag. At the Brennan's Lake house on a Saturday afternoon. When the light came through the trees like something out of a painting nobody could afford. Patricia handled everything. She didn't do it to prove a point. She did it because she was a mother who loved her son and wanted his wedding to be beautiful, which is what mothers are supposed to do. It wasn't $96,000. It was wildflowers from a local farm arranged in mason jars by Patricia's Garden Club. It was a guitarist from the church in Chapel Hill who played acoustic covers during the ceremony. It was Chloe in a consignment wedding dress that fit her like it had been waiting for her. $275 altered by a seamstress in Cary for another $65. It was real and warm and full of laughter. And it was better than anything in that 3-inch binder could have been. I was there. Second row, left side, lavender dress on sale at Belk for $45. I didn't organize anything. I didn't bring a casserole. I didn't set up chairs or pour wine, or manage the seating chart. I just showed up. For the first time in 10 years, I just showed up. Diane approached me at the dock during sunset. The reception was winding down. Kids chasing fireflies, Daniel and Chloe dancing to something slow. She stood next to me, and we looked at the water. You look nice, she said. Your hair's longer. Normal mother things. Small things. The kind of things that might, over time, build back into something bigger. Robert found me later, handed me a card. Inside, in his careful handwriting. I should have been braver. I'm trying. Grandma Helen caught the bouquet from her wheelchair. I've still got it, she said, and the whole lake house laughed. Sometimes the hardest thing you can do is say no to the people who raised you. Here's what I know. The people who love you don't hand you ultimatums at the dinner table. They hand you a plate and ask how your day was. A Christmas dinner. 35 relatives. One word. No. 118 calls in a single day. 58 voicemails. And an email that changed everything. Not because it was a weapon, but because it was the truth. Daniel's parents offered generosity. My mother refused it, and she tried to make me pay the price for her pride. I said no. I said it once, and I meant it forever. You can't buy belonging. You can only earn it, or lose it trying. If your family ever asked you to pay a price for belonging, if they ever stood up at a holiday dinner and told you that love comes with an invoice, tell me your story in the comments. Share this one with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to Quiet Justice Tales so you never miss a story. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next one.